I'm reading you your bedtime story, which is Palace Wagon Family, the true story of the Donner Party. All right. Nobody seemed worse for the delay. By noon, the wagons were again on the move. For 4 more days, they traveled on across the Kansas prairie, passing a number of Indian villages. A few of the squaws and braves came into camp begging for food, which the Reed family gladly shared with them. "They're a poor looking lot," Mr. Reed remarked as they swarmed around the palace wagon. Jimmy rushed inside to tell Grandma. "Indians!" he shouted. "Not so loud," scolded Mrs. Reed. "Grandma's cold has made her a little hoarse, but she can hear all right. Maybe she'd like to see the Indians. Hold up the wagon flap, Patty. No, you, Puss, you're taller." "They've gone away, Mama. Pa threw out some tobacco to them," Virginia giggled. "They just wanted to see themselves in the mirror." "Then why are we stopping? What's the matter?" "Where are we?" Grandma asked. Virginia looked out to see a swollen river ahead. "It's the Big Blue, I guess. The name fits it, but how will we get across?" Soon everyone was asking the same question. Here there were no ferry barges as there had been at other big rivers. The cattle could swim, but what about the wagons? Captain Russell called a meeting to decide what should be done. "If we all work together, we can build rafts and float the wagons over," Mr. Reed suggested, but the others shouted him down. For the first time, angry voices were raised against him. Giesberg's was louder than the rest. The big German had been in the habit of beating his wife. Pa actually had to stop him once, and you know what? Virginia told a circle of laughing friends. She stood up for him. "I have to laugh at their funny talk while they're arguing over there. Why can't we take a little time to enjoy ourselves?" The young men in the party agreed. Pat Dolan, a jolly bachelor traveling with the Breen family, brought out a fiddle. The merrymaking continued for some time, with John Denton singing for the children's entertainment. "We Tommies set out with a big wagon train, with Jim and Virginia and sweet Patty Jane. Hi ho, sweet Patty Jane." "Then what happened?" squealed the little children. "Sing some more." John Denton was something of a poet. He made up more words as he sang along. "Then Tom got himself in a big hollow tree, and very connected they all seemed to be. Hi ho there in the tree." "Oh, thank you, Uncle John," cried Patty. "Come on, Tommy, let's sing it for Grandma." They ran back to the palace wagon, their home on wheels. Jimmy and Virginia waited and listened as the men argued and shouted at each other. So one of the things with a wagon train, one of the problems is there was somebody who was usually the captain of the wagon train, and if they made decisions, everybody had to agree to the decisions, and so took a long time for everybody to decide what to do. So while they're trying to decide what to do, they're wasting time. So if they had hurried and come to a decision, things would have been better for them. Let's see. Captain Russell's soldiers had discovered that the river was rising steadily. Finally, it was put to a vote, and those who had objected to the raft had to give in. Jimmy was jubilant. "Pa won. They're going to build a raft. Now we'll get across the river," he yelled, racing Virginia to the wagon to tell the others. "Shh," Patty whispered as they rushed in. "Grandma's cold is worse. Ma says she may be dying. She can't talk anymore." "Did you sing to her?" asked Virginia. "Yes," replied Patty, beginning to cry. "I don't know if she heard me or the angels." Virginia sat beside her grandmother part of the night. Toward morning she fell asleep, to be awakened by a shout from outside. The men were yelling directions for building the raft, but they were too late for Grandma Keys. She had already crossed the Big Blue. News of the old lady's death spread swiftly through the company. The Reed children spoke in hushed voices of the Indian stories Grandma used to tell them in the old family home back in Springfield. She had lived through so many adventures. It seemed a shame that she had to die just at the beginning of this one. Friends and strangers came around to the palace wagon to express their sympathy. Work on the raft halted. All turned out to assist with a grand funeral. Mr. Thornton spoke of the solemnity of death in the wilderness. A minister in Captain Russell's party said a few words of comfort. Grandma's Bible was almost as if she were Grandma's Bible was read almost as if she were listening, and then John Denton, who'd been a gold beater back in England, found a stone on which he carved Mrs. Sarah Keyes, died May 29th, 1846. At the head of the grave was a tree on which another inscription was cut, giving the date and the place of Grandma's birth. Afterwards, when the children were helping plant wild flowers on the fresh mound of earth, Patty whispered, "I snipped off a lock of Grandma's hair to keep with my treasures." "What treasures?" asked Virginia. Patty just smiled a little secret smile and said nothing. She had stopped crying, but Mrs. Reed could hardly be comforted. "It was a mistake to bring her with us," she kept saying. We should have known she couldn't stand all that riding." "But Mama, it was just the stopping that tired her," Virginia objected. "Don't be sorry she had a little part of our adventure. She was old. She might have died just the same if she had stayed in Springfield." "Puss is right, Margaret," Mr. Reed began. "Your mother lived her life." "And now it's our turn," Jimmy interrupted. "Come on, Pa, let's see how they're getting on with the raft. Let's all watch them. Come on, Pat and Tommy." "Look there," cried Virginia as they came nearer to the river. "Some of the men are already across. They swam across on their horses. May I swim Billy over? Please, Papa, may I?" "It looks too dangerous. Just leave him to Milt, and he'll get him over there all right," Mr. Reed answered. Crossing the river proved to be tiring work for both men and horses. First, trees were cut into logs about 25 feet in length. These were hollowed out and united by cross timbers. Stakes were then driven in both banks so that the raft could be pulled back and forth by ropes. Finally, everything was ready for the dangerous work of ferrying the wagons across. And this is what it looks like. So they actually put the whole wagon on a raft and pull it across. And you can see there's a stake right across on the other side. So they would kind of keep the wagon tight between the two sides of the river, because remember, the river's flowing, and if you don't hang on, your wagon is going to flow down the river on the raft, right? Let's see. Finally, everything was ready for the dangerous work of ferrying the wagons across. "Easy there, let her go. Come on, Big Blue Rover," the men yelled as the raft was launched. One after another, the wagons were lowered so that the wheels fit into the hollowed logs. They tipped and tilted dangerously in the swirling river. It took all one day and part of the next to get them across and to swim the horses and cattle. A chill wind had blown up. Milt brought Billy safely across, but when he came up out of the river, he was shivering violently. "I'm glad that's over," he declared as the pony shook himself and trotted over to his mistress. The wagons were all across. Not one of them had slipped off the raft. Even the palace wagon rode safely. It seemed a little empty now without Grandma, but aside from that, there was little change. The wagons moved on much as before, making sometimes as much as 20 miles a day. "That's good going for the oxen," the teamsters told each other. Virginia could ride faster on Billy. Often she did ride out into the flower-studded prairie with the Donner girls, who also rode horseback. They would dismount to gather flowers and then gallop back to find the oxen still plodding along. Sometimes Tams and Donner would sit with her back against a tree and sketch the flowers the girls brought her. Under each sketch she wrote its name and something about the flower. "This is the lupin," she said, selecting a lovely blue blossom from Elitha's bouquet. "But this one, will you find out its name?" Leanna asked as the lovely young stepmother of the two girls paused to study the new flower. Later in a letter she wrote to editor Francis, she described it as resembling the bloom of the beech tree, but growing in bunches as large as a small sugar loaf, and in every variety of shade. She dated her letter the 16th of June, although she wrote it earlier. By then they had left the Big Blue far behind, and they were traveling along the North Platte towards Fort Laramie. Flowers no longer interested Virginia. Now she could ride down Buffalo with her father. The plains were alive with them. Every morning whole herds could be seen coming down from the river to drink. The big, shaggy beasts fascinated Virginia. Instead of running as the more fleet footed antelope did, the buffalo would raise his monstrous head and gaze reproachfully at the hunter. Don't shoot him, Pa. He trusts us, Virginia told her father the first time this happened. She thought it would be better to wait until the buffalo turned and started to run before firing at him. But her father soon convinced her that she was wrong. You might wound him that way. A buffalo won't attack unless he is wounded. Is that one wounded? Virginia pointed to a mound along the river bank. Something that looked like a buffalo had just crawled behind it. Mr. Reed had seen what it was. Gallop back to camp as fast as you can, he ordered Virginia. If you see any Indians, act as if nothing has happened. I think I can take care of that wounded buffalo. Virginia obeyed her father at once. That was the way he liked it, but a dozen questions were whirling around in her head. You look scared, the Donner girls observed as she rode into camp. What happened? Nothing yet, Virginia told them. I thought I saw a wounded buffalo, but it could have been an Indian hiding under a buffalo skin. Oops. Sorry, I just accidentally turned a whole bunch of pages instead of one. What's this? Tamsin Donner came over to reassure her. These Indians are friendly. I've just been writing to Editor Francis about them. Would you like to see what I've written? Virginia said she would if it wasn't too private. I don't write very well myself, she admitted. Pa laughs at my spelling. I tried to tell Cousin Mary back in Illinois about Grandma. The letter wasn't supposed to be funny, but I guess it was. She sighed. I wish I could write like this. By the way, they have Virginia is a real person, and so they actually have letters that she's written, and her spelling was atrocious. She really was one of the worst spellers in the entire world. So, and sadly, her letters have been kept because of her famous role in crossing to California, and so her bad spelling is saved forever for everyone to look at. When you try to read any of her letters, they're almost impossible to read because the spelling's so bad on them. I tried to tell Cousin Mary back in Illinois about Grandma. The letter wasn't supposed to be funny, but I guess it was. She sighed. I wish I could write like this. Virginia read the letter half through. Already she felt better. We feel no fear of Indians, Tamsin Donner had written. The chiefs of a tribe breakfasted at our tent this morning. They are all so friendly that I cannot help feeling sympathy and friendship for them. But on one sheet, what can I say? There was more on the next sheet. The letter had to be written in installments. It sounded wonderful to Virginia, although she suspected Aunt Tam of keeping some of her thoughts to herself. She was like that. We have some of the best people in our company, and some too that are not so good, she had told Editor Francis. Did she mean the Irish and German families? Virginia wondered. They were certainly different. It did not enter her head that she might seem different to them, galloping off on her pony while they must do all the hard work of the camp. She and Patty didn't have to help much with the cooking or the washing. Jimmy was the little worker in the family. His sturdy legs carried him about like lightning as he picked up buffalo chips for the campfires, for now there was no more wood. So in order to start a fire, because there weren't any trees on the Great Plains, they would pick up buffalo poop, which was called buffalo chips, and they would be dry. The buffalo poop when they're, running across the plains, and their poop dries up really hard. And so that would be the job of kids on a wagon train, is to collect buffalo poop, buffalo chips, and then they would light them on fire, and they would use those instead of wood to cook on. Tommy trotted along behind, imitating his brother, while Little Cash leapt after them. The other dogs were used for driving the cattle and sometimes for hunting. Antelope and buffalo steaks were the main foods cooked around the campfires. There was still plenty of rice, beans, cornmeal, and sugar, but the supply of wheat flour was getting low. Bread might be scarce, but it was too difficult to bake it over a campfire anyway. Biscuits or Johnny cake would do. The children had all the milk they wanted to drink. Eliza even made butter. She had the cream all ready for the churn when they came to the South Fork of the Platte River. The stream was wide and shallow. Eliza kept right on with her churning as the wagon started across. How can she be so calm? There's quicksand in the river, Virginia whispered. I heard Milt say so. The wagons aren't moving, exclaimed Patty. I can see now why it worried Grandma whenever we stopped. Are we stuck? The little boys demanded. Milt poked his head inside the wagon flap. He had been waiting in shallow water, only a little sandy at the bottom. We missed the worst of it, he reassured the children. It's been a hard pull, though. I had to stop to rest the oxen. It did seem strange to stop in the middle of the stream. After they had crossed it, things seemed stranger still. Here there were grotesque rock formations, such as none the children had ever seen. They camped by Courthouse Rock, passed Chimney Rock the next day, and on the day following they came to Scott's Bluff, where a pulley was rigged up to let the wagons down. So we're going to stop right there. All right. I hope you're enjoying reading about their journey westward. We are partway across the Great Plains.